So Phil, Janine, always a pleasure to sit down. If you wouldn't mind just starting and introducing yourself. And Phil, do you want to maybe start as well talking about Zilch's wonderful success story, and then Janine, a little bit about the Unicorn Council and your work at Innovate Finance?
Yeah,
Sure, brilliant. Well, my name is Philip Belamant. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Zilch. And effectively, we are building the most empowering and rewarding way for people to pay. The very short story of Zilch is that we were looking at the market and we realized that people across the UK and the US are spending about $150 billion, if you can believe it, $150 billion a year in fees and interest. Just fees and interest, not on the products they're buying, just fees and interest on the credit that they're accessing. And so the whole concept of Zilch is, how do you fix that problem? How do you subsidize that cost down to a level that makes financial sense for people on an ongoing, consistent basis? And we asked ourselves one question, and that was, what are people doing with this money when they borrow it? And it sounds obvious to say that people are buying things. And those sellers are paying billions of dollars away to companies to advertise and get in front of people who are buying. And so what Zilch really does is we combine buyers and sellers, we bring them together at the most opportune moment, the point of payment, and we make revenue out of the ad budgets of these brands and use that to subsidize the cost for the mass consumer market. And that's really the business that we've built. And so the aspiration is to drive that 150 billion to zero to Zilch. That's where the name comes from. So that is the business we've built. We had about 4 million customers after around 40 months in operation. We've done more than 3 billion in sales and saved our customers $500 million and counting in fees and interest so far to date.
And people are familiar with the buy now, pay later space, I think, listening to this. But who are your peers? And if there was one thing, if there was an investor looking at this and watching this interview, what would you want them to know?
I think what's important for people to know today is that while it's convenient to have a peer or direct comp, today we don't really have any other company in the market that's doing quite what we're doing. So you would need to combine a couple of businesses. We always say that Zilch is 3 companies in one. We have a payments business, a lending business, and an ad business, an ad tech company combined. And so, if you take something like an Amex, you take a business like an Affirm or a Klarna, BNPL company, you combine these things and you add something like a Google together, what you've effectively then got is Zilch. And that's why we're quite unique from what's in the market today. So I think what's really interesting for investors to learn and understand about this business is it's very resilient, it's counter-cyclical, it doesn't suffer the problems of traditional lending companies. We turn the money fast, we can update policies really quickly, we don't charge any APRs to customers, no late fees of any kind, and we make a diverse set of revenue coming from both merchants and customers as this network and flywheel continues to drive itself forward. And that's what's quite unique about the business we've built. And so that's what's obviously seen the growth that we've experienced today.
Fastest unicorn in Europe, double unicorn. I think that goes without saying, right? Janine, You're one of the co-chairs of the Unicorn Council. Could you talk a little bit about why you set this up and with Phil and the others, and your work at Innovate Finance so far?
Yes, absolutely. Let me start with Innovate Finance because that will make it easier to understand why we launched the Unicorn Council. Innovate Finance, we're the industry body for UK FinTech. We were set up 10 years ago, so this is actually our 10th anniversary year. And we represent the innovators, the disruptors, the challengers. We bring together the full FinTech ecosystem, so your early stage companies through to the likes of your highest growth companies such as Zilch, but also Wise, Revolut, Monzo, everyone in between. And ultimately, our main mission is to support the next generation of technology-led innovators to create that more inclusive and that more democratic financial services sector that works better for everyone. Part of what we're also trying to do is ensure that the UK FinTech ecosystem remains a world leader. And in order for us to do that, we need to ensure that we are supporting the innovators, the CEOs, the founders, such as Phil and the other unicorns in the UK, to make the environment here the best it can possibly be. both for fintechs to scale and to grow, but also ultimately to list and stay in the UK for the benefit not only of the sector, but actually for the consumers and the individuals all across the country. And the reason we set up the Unicorn Council in collaboration with Zilch, and we have a group of co-chairs that includes Philip, myself, and also Francesca from Revolut and Charles from ClearBank, was really to make sure that we were able to give a roadmap for government around the key policy areas we need to see change take place in order for the environment here to be even better for these unicorns to stay and list and scale in the UK.
Absolutely. And how have you seen the industry change with regards to market access and regulatory support over the years that you've been at this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And actually, I have been with Innovate Finance since the very beginning, 10 years ago, in different roles. I took over as CEO about 3 years ago. But it's been phenomenal to see the sector mature. And you have companies that started out, Revolut and Monzo, for example, started out the same year as Innovate Finance in 2015. Revolut has more than 35 million customers. Monzo has more than 9 million customers. Look at the incredible success that Zilch itself has undergone in terms of being a double unicorn. You are seeing these disruptors and these challengers come in and completely transform financial services. Now, what we also need to see happen is that regulators and government continue to make change at the same pace as industry. And that's one of the reasons we have this Unicorn Council and we're setting up this coalition of different fintechs. I think where we've seen change and shift over the years is that if you look back, for example, to 2016, 2017, the FCA was very much at the forefront of being the most innovative regulator, I would argue, in the world. So they set up a fintech sandbox that's now been replicated by more than 40 countries around the world. We need to ensure that we're still seeing that type of innovative approach from the regulators to allow some of these innovators to bring their products to service and facilitate the broader access to individuals and consumers as well.
How have you seen the investment landscape change in the investment environment? Obviously, we had COVID, then we had rampant inflation. Now markets are opening up a little bit, M&A markets, IPO markets, as signs of life. What does the UK FinTech investment landscape look like today? And how does that compare versus the US, which, as we know, is an extremely big market? And how does the UK compare to the rest of the European nations?
You know, we're celebrating the 10th anniversary of our Innovate Finance Global Summit this year. And we've been looking back at the last decade of innovation and the UK FinTech ecosystem in particular. And the progress that we've made is actually astonishing. And when you think about the investment landscape, time and again, the UK has come out on top, second only behind the United States. And last year was exactly the same. So despite a pretty difficult economic year for all business segments, not just financial services, for any business, we still saw more than $5.1 billion US invested into UK FinTech. That is second in the world only to the United States, and it's actually ahead of all of the rest of Europe combined. So we are very much that global leader, and we continue to maintain that position as well. And COVID, I should add, was a really interesting time for fintechs because you actually saw the role and the value that digital solutions played during that period like never before. And the ensuing cost of living crisis, fintechs had a huge role to play in helping so many individuals and SMEs across the country really navigate through that period as well.
And Phil, you started Zilch in amongst that kind of pandemic period, obviously extremely volatile time that exposed many business models, and you obviously saw rapid growth. So what were some of the pivotal growth factors behind Zilch's ascent and rise? And how can some of these learnings and lessons and kind of growth levers that you've pulled be applied and almost enabled by regulation and market access for those other big firms contemplating IPOs in London, etc.?
I mean, it's a combination of things. I mean, I think anyone who kind of would say a business has been successful for this one or two reasons, you know, that's typically not the case. You know, so the stars need to align to some degree. And I think a lot of companies were beneficiaries of the ZIRP era. You know, you obviously had the lowest cost of capital, really, I think, that we've actually ever seen. You know, so you had a huge amount of money pouring into investments and opportunities like Zilch and other firms, and we certainly were a beneficiary of that. That was, you know, a huge opportunity for us. And then you also had the counter side to that. So you had quite literally some companies drown in capital. They're gone. They didn't make it. And so, I think the combination of access to cheaper capital, everyone's risk appetite being higher, and so, you may have had people invest in certain growth equities that you typically wouldn't see them invest in. That was really useful. And then combining that with the fact that between myself, my co-founder, Sean, we've seen a lot of this before and built businesses before. And I don't think 3 or 4 years ago, investors were placing a lot of value on the operational experience of the management team, the founders and the management. I look at the management we have in Zilch. We've collected a group of people that have felt the pain of the problem we're solving themselves, all of them, to some degree, and then at the same time have either built their own companies, and fortunately we've managed to have them come join this opportunity together with me and my co-founder, or have worked in businesses and helped build those businesses. So 4 years ago, I don't think the investment thesis was focusing too hard on execution ability. It was kind of looking at the business. Do we think the TAM's large? We've got a lot of risk appetite and there's a lot of money sloshing around that needs to find a home. This gave rise to SPACs and other types of opportunities. So let's go do it. I think what's happened now is everyone is going, well, you need management to operate. They have to execute. And so because we had both, the stars did align. We were able to access, a huge amount of capital, which was fantastic. At the same time, we had the execution capability to really go and kind of keep a level head through this, where every investor was saying, grow as fast as you can. There'll be the next check. What a lot of firms found out is that the next check didn't arrive. And so, at least we had that sort of level-headedness to go, let's grow at the speed we think is appropriate, and we can manage and actually control. And therefore, if something should change, we can at least shift to accommodate that change. And we've had to go and do that. I mean, this is effectively what a lot of businesses have had to go and do. Some just, unfortunately, they just either couldn't do it in time, or they had gone too hard and too fast, and they just couldn't cut the burn to where they needed to turn things around. And so I think it's that a combination of these two things has certainly helped. And then, of course, you have to look at the value proposition. What are you offering to customers, and what value do customers see in that? And I would say we're very fortunate to find product market fit with the proposition right from the get-go. And that product market fit has only grown as cost of living has obviously started to bite and become more of a problem for all of us. Everyone can feel the cost of living crisis happening. And so the products become more and more relevant, not less relevant, which is obviously something that, we feel thankful to be in a position to help people and see that product market fit continue to expand and grow. So it's a combination of these things that has really led to us being in the position we are today, and we're able to grow at the speed that we delivered on.
And building on that, the allure of the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange is evident, right? Deeper pools of liquidity, better market access, better market visibility, arguably. How does the Unicorn Council hope to drive change here in London to be able to keep pace with the innovation and visibility that exists already in the US?
I think I'm going to also, Janine's got a lot to say about this one. I'll just start by saying, we've sat with Julia Hoggett numerous times and had this conversation. We think of this in 3 ways. It's liquidity is a big deal. We need to talk about that. Policy, and then perception. These are the 3 ways, in our minds at least, we think about this. And effectively, the reason we group the thinking into these 3 areas is that you have to have the liquidity. And we know this is an ongoing, consistent debate. If you list in the UK versus abroad, is there the same type of liquidity? And, this speaks to where our pension funds putting their money. Can we incentivize retail investors to buy and hold UK stocks? What's going on in this regard? And certainly there's work to be done there. Then you think about policy. So policy is what's enabling companies like ours to scale. And are we seeing those policies help or hurt these businesses? In some cases, you talk about what's happened over the last 10 years, and Janine's sort of had a front row seat to all of this. In some cases, unfortunately, what you've seen is some decisions are making, in my view, us go backwards entrepreneurs relief going from 10 million to 1 million. I mean, this is a surefire way to go and disincentivize people from saying, I want to start up a company in the UK. That was never the case. So a couple of decisions are going against the grain, and that's certainly not helping. We need to reverse those things. We need to understand why. We need to go and make a change. And then also helping companies really scale in the UK. The startup scene in the UK has certainly always been a fantastic place to be, but a scale up is a very different situation, and other issues are impacting businesses at our type of level: R&D, VAT, the treatment of VAT, EMI. These are all issues we have to contend with daily, and we really need those things to fall in our favor. And then finally, perception. And we're actually just talking a little bit about this. Yeah. We were saying perhaps perception is the hardest thing for us to go and change and fix. In the UK, Janine mentions this. I mean, the tech sector in the UK is now, I think, third in the world, just behind, and I'm talking technology complete, the whole tech sector, third behind the US and China in the world, right? We're the second largest pools of capital here in the UK. So why is it that we do typically see companies that are getting to real size going and listing in New York somewhere? Why is that the case? And, we think that perhaps a bunch of this is around perception. We really do need to change the narrative and the perception of this in the UK. Make sure we get pension funds investing in these stocks, buying and holding. Make sure retail is incentivized to buy and hold these stocks and not the equivalent stock in the US for free. These are the things we need to change and make sure it happens. I don't know, Janine, did you want to add to that?
I think that was a perfect actual summary of it. And ultimately, I mean, we are, just to build on that, we are the best place in the world to build and scale and grow a fintech business. And we need to talk a bit more about that and showcase all of the great successes. And just take a look around at the phenomenal innovators, the phenomenal founders, Phil, like yourself, that have chosen the UK, coming from actually all over, have said, I want to set up my business in the UK, and there's a reason for that. So shifting that mindset, looking at how we approach risk is really, really important. The other piece I would add is I think we're going into an interesting year in 2024, because in all likelihood, we probably will have an election. There are also more than 40 democratic elections, I believe, happening all over the world. So things will change significantly this year. It's so important because I really believe that at the end of the day, industry, government, and regulators, we all want to be moving in the same direction, right? We all want the UK to really build on and develop its leadership in financial innovation and financial technology, because at the end of the day, it's better for consumers everywhere, right? We did a report last year that shows 98% of UK fintechs have a positive impact on the UK economy. More than a quarter are directly addressing inequality by providing broader access, and more than a third are actually supporting social institutions that support peace and justice. This sector has a hugely positive impact, and there are benefits that can be felt across the country. So if we can bring all of that momentum together and actually give a map that says, here are some of the changes that has to happen to make us even more of a leader, I just think our future is really quite bright and positive.
What happens if it doesn't change?
Well, I think there's no state secret as to what might happen, because you're seeing it happen to some degree already, right? So people are just going to really vote with their feet, and ultimately you will see, I think you will still continue to see people starting businesses here, building businesses here to scale. Unfortunately, at that point, you might find that people still take the decision to say, let me go get the liquidity. Let me go and list in a market that accepts this business is going to continue to grow, print profits, enrich people that are doing all the hard work and have taken the risk up front to make these businesses, and so on and so forth. You might just continue, you might continue to see that. That is just something we have to accept. And that is why I think, the whole purpose of the Unicorn Council is really to go in and not just focus on IPO. It's not just focused on IPO, but it certainly is around how do we go and make sure companies continue to be born here, built here, scale here, and have the option, the very viable, realistic option of listing here and thriving worldwide, but staying here as a listed business. And these are some of the things that have to change. The good news is, there's not a laundry list of 40 items. There really is a handful of items that are being identified by all of the companies in the council, and they seem to be quite uniform in their views. These are a handful of things, that would fundamentally change the game.
So what initiatives, talking realistically and actionably, can actually shift this investor engagement and education more positively with the government, and what you're trying to do? What discussions are really happening right now?
Well, I think Janine's got a lot to say about this. I'll just make a quick comment, and that is that the whole reason we came to be sitting here is we had just walked out of Treasury after a fantastic conversation, very positive conversation, and it wasn't the first one we'd had. So let's start by saying, the government today is very focused on this and very engaged. And I think, you mentioned that there will likely to be an election this year. We're actually seeing that both parties are very engaged in this. So the appetite to lean into this and make a big step change is there. That is for sure. I don't think we're lacking in policymakers approach this and saying we want to make this the best it could possibly be. So you have that. So willingness is something that you always need, right? And I think the good news is we have that in spades. What was happening is that you had a whole bunch of conversations going on across multiple firms, different times, different stakeholders, and of course different policymakers, all happening and everyone driving their own agenda. Of course, this is a huge laundry list of things. And the real question is, how do you make that? How do you distill that into an actionable set of items that any policymakers could really even digest, let alone action? This was the whole purpose of the Unicorn Council, is go and get the industry's voice. We have 50 billion in market cap of companies that have joined the council already. It's really only been in existence for a number of weeks. And so, that's pretty phenomenal to see the traction so far. Go and get a real view from the CEOs and founders of these companies who are experiencing the pain today, not a theoretical pain on an Excel spreadsheet, an actual pain in the management accounts or the operations of their firm, and distill those views into one succinct list, and then have a firm like Innovate Finance who already has this dialogue, they've got the relationships, they understand what's happening, they've had 10 years of experience in the space to be able to go and communicate and say, this is a realistic way for this to change. And we understand that you could make that change happen because we understand the landscape, rather than one firm asking for something and a firm asking for something else across thousands of firms. I don't know, Janine, if you want to say anything.
I completely agree with that. I think that's a perfect succinct answer, yeah.
And reflecting on the UK FinTech potential, right? We're having this honest dialogue. There's lots of good things happening. Probably things could be done, more things could be done. If we get this right, what impact could this have for the Zilches of the world, jobs in the UK, economic growth? Could it be a huge catalyst for future growth? What's your outlook on that?
Yeah, maybe I'll chip in and then because I would actually say it shouldn't really be a question of if. I think we have to. Because quite honestly, the leadership of the UK in terms of its financial services more broadly on a global basis is fundamentally going to come down as to whether or not we are able to support our fintech companies to the level that we need to keep them here. So if we are going to look at the UK as a global leader in financial services on a broader basis, we have to deliver on some of these asks to make sure that we keep our fintechs and we can support them as they grow. I think there's a huge opportunity here on so many levels in terms of transforming financial services, making it more effective, making it more democratic, and making it better, but also just looking at the people employed within this sector. We have nearly 100,000. We've got last quantum around 76,500 people, and we expect that to surpass around 120,000 over the next few years. It has an incredible impact on the economy on a broader basis. We are one of the most thriving sectors of business here in the UK economy. So the impact on the UK on a wider basis is absolutely critical, and that's why it's so important that we do support this sector.
And over the next kind of 3 to 5 years, as this fintech scene evolves and the Unicorn Council really takes a grip on policymakers and regulation and exchanges and liquidity, what do you hope to achieve? What would you, in 5 years' time, look back and say, yeah, we did something really special here?
Janine,
well, we have Zilch listing here in the UK. We have a lot of other companies listing here in the UK. And that we just are the best place in the world for fintechs to start and build and scale and grow. And I think in a few years' time, there should be no question about that if we are able to deliver on some of these actions.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely with that. You could almost set the KPIs, the scoreboard is on the LSE. I mean, ultimately, you look at this, And then you obviously just look at the size and scale of these companies, and you could measure it this way. I agree completely with the sentiment that there is no option. We must succeed in this endeavor. We have to do that. And you would ultimately see it. If it didn't happen, these companies will be either smaller or they will not stay here.
Yes.
That is the moral of the story. It's simple to see it. And you could just look at the scoreboard and you're going to see that. So in 5 years' time, if the scoreboard looks great, ultimately what that would have meant is these policies have been passed. They've had the appropriate effect and impact. And, the thousands, tens of thousands of jobs will have been created. The gross value add will be there to the economy in the country. And ultimately, you will see the market thriving and continuing to thrive. And again, this is a perception thing. It is thriving. We need to make sure it continues to thrive, in the future. So I would agree completely with that statement.
Yeah, it reminds me of numbers don't lie, check the scoreboard, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what it's all about. Janine, Phil, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing the success of the Unicorn Council and a potential Zilch IPO, maybe.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you very much.